Hello world, I'm Chris Pirillo. This is my iPad mini, and this is my iPad mini review. And don't forget, one of my Instagram followers is going to be getting this iPad mini on Thanksgiving Day, no matter where you happen to live on the planet. All you have to do is follow me on Instagram, @Chris Pirillo. I've been using this iPad almost exclusively as, well, my iPad of choice, because I wanted to see what it was like. Having used an iPad from the first generation all the way to the fourth generation, I was really interested in knowing how I would feel about a smaller screen that is still rather large. Of course, if you've looked up the specs, you know that the iPad mini measures 7.9 compared to the classic iPad measuring 9.7. See, they just transposed the numbers. Easy way to keep those numbers straight. Yes, this is an iPad, but smaller than the iPad that you were used to, and that's exactly what the experience is. Some people have gone as far as to say the size of this iPad, the iPad mini, is the size the iPad should have been all along. And I could see why they would say that. It's a good screen. It's a good size. One thing that I happen to like is that all of my iPad apps worked perfectly on this smaller screen, and I didn't have any issues with that. And of course, you know what? 275,000 iPad optimized apps in the App Store, and a lot of them are very good, and I have so many apps. Many, and these are all folders, of them I'd already highlighted in my iPad tour that I did last year, so I don't want to dive into that at this point in time. The system was responsive as I was used to with the iPad 2. Certainly not as fast as the iPad 4th generation, but no slouch either. When I would load a web page, it didn't seem to lag any. I was able to get around iOS like I've gotten around iOS before on an iPad, on a smaller screen. Another thing that kind of surprised me, and I appreciated this, though the iPad mini has a lower DPI, or dots per inch, than its Retina cousins, it's not that bad. I mean, yes, if you put your face right on top of the screen, you can see the images aren't as sharp and the text isn't as crisp, but it's not so bad when you're holding it an arm's length away, or like this. This is not even a full arm's length away. I would be shocked if you would be able to tell the difference between the iPad mini DPI or a Retina display DPI. And that's not to say that it couldn't be better, because certainly it could be better, but it's not bad, and I'm not the only person to say that. If you have a chance to see something like this in person, an iPad mini, then you can judge for yourself. The average person probably isn't going to see much of a difference, or if they do, they're not going to think about it much. It was most pronounced when I saw text that hadn't necessarily been optimized for this screen. So another thing that I liked was that it's very lightweight, like extremely lightweight, like it's almost not even there. It's very balanced. I felt like I could hold on to it like this. I felt like I could hold on to it like this. I felt like I could hold on to it like this, and it just never really caused any degree of fatigue. It felt a bit more comfortable holding the iPad mini in landscape mode compared to portrait, but either way was very, very comfortable, and certainly nothing that would cause me any concern for the things that I would be looking for. So this is the same iOS experience. It's an iPad, but it's smaller. So things that I didn't like, and yes, there are a few things. One, the display could have been sharper. Certainly. I mean, you're never going to hear me argue, no, it's too sharp. Who would say that? Nobody. So that's one thing that I would have appreciated having. Another thing I didn't like is if you're holding the iPad in a portrait orientation and your thumb or finger is just over the bezel, sometimes, even though iOS has now been optimized, you can see my thumb is in the middle of the screen, I can still browse and navigate. Sometimes, even with my thumb in that position, apps wouldn't cooperate. So I realize Apple has accommodated the idea that shorter bezels or smaller bezels would still allow you to hold on to the iPad without touching the bezel, without interrupting experience. They still have some work to do with that. Of course, now it's making a liar out of me. It's working well. It's just something that I didn't like. The smart cover works. It works well, although I found that a few times when I would go to slap it on, it wouldn't be perfectly aligned, and I would have to readjust it. Of course, again, it's making a liar out of me. Let's see if I can get it to misalign again. There we go. So sometimes it didn't align perfectly. I mean, oh gosh, you're just going over every little detail. Well, I'm just saying that's something that I didn't like. Another thing I didn't like, and I'm going to see if I can better demonstrate this here, the smart cover. And this is really less about the iPad's issue and more about the smart covers issue in relation to the iPad. It wasn't very sturdy. So as I was tapping around, if I'm on a web page typing in text, I would find that the iPad would bounce a bit. There'd be almost too much wobble in the iPad with this particular smart cover. I wish Apple did a better job, or could do a better job with the smart cover. So that's less about an iPad shortcoming, more about the iPad accessory shortcoming. I guess those two things. But there's still things to keep in mind. So there's been a question of, why wasn't this Retina? Why isn't it more powerful? And I think those reasons are pretty clear. 1, price. 2, battery. And 3, supplies. So to keep the iPad mini running at 10 hours plus battery life, the screen can't be pushing too many pixels, because then the battery wouldn't be able to handle, or wouldn't be able to last as long. And of course, price too, because a higher DPI display is likely to cost more. And then of course, supplies. Apple's already having issues keeping up with demand across their product lines. So I do believe that this is one of the reasons why the iPad mini shipped in the state that it did, with the screen resolution, screen size, battery, etc. So in the future, I would certainly expect to see a Retina display iPad mini. That being said, if you're interested in the iPad mini, and Retina isn't that important to you, or you can't see the difference between the two, because many people can't, don't let that hold you back from getting an iPad mini today, if it's in your budget. That being said, when the next iPad mini is released, it's my belief that they'll still continue to sell the first generation iPad minis at a lower price, much like they have the iPad 2, as Apple continues to sell that at a lower rate than the, what would you call it, the leading iPad 4th generation. So I would expect to see the same thing happen. And then this iPad mini, this first gen iPad mini, may come closer to the $200 mark. But it's still a good machine, even at $329. Another thing that I would expect to see in the future is, and I'm trying to figure out how to explain this and make the point very clear. I don't think you're going to see the latest generation hardware in the iPad mini. And for a few different reasons. One, this is not a workhorse. It is definitely an iPad. You can get stuff done on it, but it's not their Pro machine. Their Pro machine is likely going to continue to be their 9.7-inch model, or the classic iPad. I think you're always going to see the processor running 1 or 2 generations behind in the iPad mini, if only because it's smaller. So as the battery technology advances, in order for Apple to, boast a longer battery life in the classic iPads, the 9.7-inch iPads, it has to have a bigger battery. Well, if they're wanting to keep this small and lightweight, that battery has to be, placed in lockstep with a processor that's going to be able to keep it at the same battery or performance level. So that's one of the reasons why I do believe you're never going to see the latest gen processor in the latest version of an iPad mini. I do believe the target audience is females, but as a guy, I have liked the iPad mini. It definitely gets a pass for me. One of my, I would say, best tablet experiences. This is every bit a computer as any other computer that I've used, and I've been happy. But I'm not the only one who's been happy with it. Diana has something to say about the iPad mini too.
I love it.